Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on connecting for collecting data, qualitative research online with human participants with Dr. Janet Salm, sorry. And this is part of the Qualitative Research and Innovation webinar series that we're partnering with NVivo and Sage Publishing, excuse me. So first, just to go over some of the GoToWebinar instructions. So everyone is on mute, just so it's easier for you to hear us. The handout, the slide handout, is available in the handout section, so you can just download that if you'd like. This is being recorded, and you'll get the recording in an email. It's only a few days after the webinar, too. Now, you can ask questions at any time. There's a question area in the panel, GoToWebinar panel, and we'll be taking questions at the end, but feel free to type in questions as you think of them. So first off, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Stacy Penna. I'm the NVivo Community Director here at QSR International, and I'll be talking more about upcoming community events at the end. And with me is Ali, so I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Ali Owen. I'm based in the Sage London office, and I'm the commissioning editor for Research Methods books. So I'll also be talking about other books that Janet is involved in with Sage, as well as just general Sage methods topics later on.
Great, thank you, Ali. Somebody asked about the handouts, and it's just in the handout section in the GoToWebinar. To get to the GoToWebinar menu, you have an orange box at the top right-hand corner of your screen. You click on the white arrow, and it opens up the menu for you. So here is our presenter, Janet. She's with Sage Method Space and Vision to Lead. She has a lot of experience with scholarly writing and coaching and research, and we're really happy to have her today to help talk to you about working with online research. So Janet, welcome.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's see, I need to share my screen. Okay.
Perfect. We can see your PowerPoint.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Very happy to be here with you today. And in my work and my writing, I try to help researchers think through design choices, particularly for online research, and then to communicate their decisions to the people that need to make approvals, as well as to partners and participants. So throughout my books, you'll find that I offer conceptual frameworks and practical tips, and that's what I'm going to try to do here today. So, you know, there are lots and lots of ways to collect qualitative data online, and I did offer a kind of a more of an overview webinar for NVivo called When the Field is Online, and you can watch that recording for, you know, kind of a broader introduction. But today I want to go more specifically into the kind of research that engages participants using synchronous technologies. So, you know, of course, online research is not going to work for all studies. You know, it just, you know, there's no one size fits all. And certainly I understand that there are a lot of people who really are in a dilemma right now because the research they wanted to do is just not going to be possible. However, I think, you know, there are, you know, lots of ways that we can do kind of a little bit more creative and engaging online research than perhaps, you know, was common before we were, you know, kind of pushed into this situation. And maybe one of the upsides, if there could be one upside of the pandemic, is that more people have become comfortable with online communication. So I think that opens it up for us to use these tools in research, you know, in new ways. So I created this e-research framework because I think that it's advantageous to approach research design in a holistic way. And while certainly all research benefits from a coherent design. It's particularly true when we're doing online research because each technology, just operates in a very different way, and will have an, kind of an influence on the other choices. So here today, what we're going to look at is these three aspects of this overall, because we could be here for many days if we were going to cover them all. So we're going to look at kind of the choice of technology features and the kinds of methods to use for collecting data. So what kinds of data can we collect? And certainly the types of data that we want to collect will influence our choices about the technology we're going to use. So I like to think about them as, visual types of data, including images and media, which of course then spills over into the oral types of data, and text data. Today we're going to look primarily at the kind of visual and oral styles. So as I say, I don't know, there's just something about the way my mind works that I think in terms of models and frameworks and try to kind of organize things in some way. So when I was working on the Doing Qualitative Research Online book, I came up with this idea that, I mean, we have kind of three categories here. So at the top, extant data. This type involves using materials we are not influencing. So, there are lots of materials available online, all kinds of archives and social media and, documents, images, it's all kinds of stuff that, we can find. That when we move between the extant and the elicited, that line is kind of a firm line because, once we get to, if we're using any kind of elicited approach, we have actual participants who are consenting participants. There are questions in extant data, some you might need consent or permission to use, but with elicited, once we get into the elicited and enacted, we are definitely going to have consenting participants. So there's kind of a distinction there. In terms of our roles as researchers, we're interacting with people. So with the elicited studies, this means, we're asking some kind of question or prompting responses in some way. But then, when working on this book, and I found that, we needed yet another category because, there are a lot of studies that go beyond asking questions and, use methods that allow us to generate data from within the study rather than asking someone to recall their experiences through an elicited approach. So, so I added this category. So why would we use elicitation methods? Well, if the extant data is not enough, we want the insights of individuals. We want to hear about their experiences. We want to know how they would describe their experiences and their perceptions and perspectives, etc. And we want to get, much more specific about answers to our questions because, kind of the data that we might find out there may or may not be kind of close enough to what we want to study to be adequate by itself. But then, why might we use these enacted methods? Well, if we're studying sensitive topics or topics where someone's recall might not be adequate. So if you are asking me a question about how I responded in a given situation, I might kind of censor myself to think, well, if I tell her how I really dealt with this, she's going to think, I'm a bad mother or a bad teacher, or she's not going to, be happy with my response. So, creating a setting where people can respond in other ways might allow them to talk about and express themselves in some way about more complex problems. So, here are some of the kinds of approaches that might fit into these categories. So today, I'm going to focus on the kind of illicit approaches for interviews and the enacted, more participatory kinds of approaches that I would categorize in creative and arts-based research. And, one of the points that I think is, valuable to consider when thinking about online research design that kind of goes back to my circular model is that, when we look at qualitative methods generally, like many things, there are a lot of kind of silos, so, if I'm using visual methods, I'm studying something that is a visual phenomenon. But I think when we move online, some of those boundaries need to be rethought or bridged because we might use, a variety of approaches in combination, and in kind of new ways. So, while we are taking approaches that, have been tried and true for many years in qualitative research or mixed method research, we're kind of, need to look at them in maybe a little bit different way. So when we start to think about, how we're going to communicate with participants, one of the things that we need to think about in terms of not only the kind of interaction we're going to have, but the tools we're going to use is that, what kind of response time do we want? And I think, we used to consider technologies as either synchronous or asynchronous. Either you're in real time talking with someone, or you're not. You're sending an email or posting something in on a website or something like that, where you will get a response sometime, but maybe not right now. But I think especially looking in the research context, we need to think about a little bit more broadly, and the tools that we have today kind of lend themselves to other options. So here, at one end of the continuum, I've got what I'm calling synchronicity. And this means we're not only using a tool that allows us to be online at the same time, but that's what we're doing. So I can't see you, so I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I'm guessing there are people out there who are listening to this webinar and are also doing something else. Maybe you're checking your email, maybe you're helping your kid with homeschooling, any number of things. So you have a synchronous connection, but not synchronicity. So, if we're online with participants and we want that very focused response, that's something that we need to be clear with the participants about. Why does that matter? Well, think about particularly an interview situation. If you ask me a question and I'm not responding right away, you might think, oh, Janet, that's a very touchy subject for her, and she's got to kind of gather her thoughts and deal with her emotions. Maybe she's got to wipe away a tear, but really I'm texting my friends while you're sitting there waiting for me to respond. So it does make a difference in terms of our exchange. You have to decide for your own study, how much difference does that make? Is that something that you want to make very clear to your participants? Then at the other end of the spectrum, I put near synchronous. So here, it's kind of the elongated conversation. So think like text messaging. You might send me a text message. You don't necessarily think that I'm online right this minute and I'm going to necessarily chat back to you right now, but you expect that I will be, I'll be back very soon. So, we're going to be going back and forth with a kind of a short response between the message and the answer, but maybe not immediate as we would have with the synchronous. And then at the other end with asynchronous, where perhaps we're using email or posting something in a discussion forum, and all of these are useful in research. It's just you need to decide which one or which combination you want to use and be clear about it. So today, we're going to be at the kind of synchronicity end of the spectrum of the options I'm going to describe with you. So when we're thinking about that kind of exchange, I want to talk a little bit about the options for kind of the visual method. So if we're using a tool like videoconferencing, we have the ability to exchange visually. So what should we do and why? So on the blue column, these are things that we can do electronically. So, we can share images, can send things back and forth. We can view images together as researchers together with the participants, or they can send us images, we can send them images. We have that ability to share and view. Then the next level, we could also navigate. So we could be in a visual environment. So think in terms of say a shared application. If you're showing me how you post to your blog, you're showing me how you use a particular technology tool, or we are going into a visual environment, a virtual world, or something like that. So we can wander around, not just look at still images, or we could generate images. So then on the kind of turquoise teal side of the spectrum, how can we use these in research? And let's go to a little more detail with those. So we can use visual communication to share with participants kind of complex abstract ideas, etc. So, if we've, participant doesn't necessarily want to read, a 20-page scholarly article about this topic to get the background that we want to share about it, but they might, look at a diagram and say, oh, okay, I understand what you're concerned about. I can see how these different pieces fit together. So we can communicate visually, or we can use those visuals to spur a conversation. So, if we're viewing images, we can then say, well, gee, what do you think about that? Or how does this image compare to your experience? That sort of thing. These kinds of techniques have been used for a long time in research, but I think we have an ideal opportunity to use them online. And then the third one is visual collaboration. So here, this corresponds to the generating data and to the enacted level of data collection, where we're actually creating some kind of visual representations of the experience during the study. So then we have online not only the visual, but we've also got the oral. You can see, you can hear. And so I'm primarily focusing on visual exchange today, but I wanted to include this because I think in addition to, say just the responses that participants give to questions, which would be oral, it might be that depending on the problem we're trying to study, that kind of understanding the sounds of the environment or the setting, might be valuable. So, I think that's, something to keep in mind, as you're kind of planning your research. And, I have a quote here that, sound implicates the body differently than visuals and texts. And, while as researchers, we have kind of tended to focus more on words and the written word because that's the way we present our findings as in articles or presentations, etc. But even that is changing. So, I think more attention to oral data might be useful. So with all of those things in mind, thinking about, well, what kinds of data do you want to collect and how do you want to interact with the participants, then thinking about, well, how are you going to use technology in your study? Because that's going to influence the choice of the kinds of tools that you're going to use. And here I have kind of three options. In the first, we're choosing the information communication technologies as a medium. So right now, GoToWebinar is our medium for communicating. So here, if that's what you're trying to do, you're choosing to do your research by technology because you can't meet with people face to face because of the pandemic, or maybe because they're on the other side of the world. You don't necessarily care what technology is used, and it might even be that you use different technologies with different participants because perhaps the top priority is the communication, and all of your participants might not have access to the same tools. So you might have some people who are, who don't have the ability to use some of the more sophisticated technologies, but their experience is something that you want to access. Perhaps you even you're using email or something like that with someone because they don't have a camera, or they can't log into they don't have broadband. I was speaking with someone this week who's talking about people who are in settings. I mean, it's hard for us who are technology nuts to realize that there are parts of the world where people don't have access. And even within the United States, where I am, there are certainly parts of the country where the broadband is limited. So that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to rule out those folks as participants, but we need to think through what we're going to use and why. Then at the next level, we've got a little bit more of a specific kind of criteria, because we're choosing some particular features that we want to use. So if we want the visual exchange, if we want to do video conferencing, then, for example, then we need to have a platform that will allow us to have those particular features. And I'm going to be focusing a lot on that in this with some examples. The third category is not really what I'm going to deal with here today, but for some researchers, the technology itself is the phenomenon. So these would be researchers who are studying the ways that people use social media or online communications. The tool itself is something that they're studying. So those that's another reason why people might study something online, and what their choice of technology is going to relate to the kinds of questions they have about user experiences and that sort of thing. But today we're going to look at the use of video conferencing and kind of web conferencing tools. And you'll notice that I don't talk a lot about brand names. I feel that technology companies are making plenty of money without my advertisement, but I also think that for researchers, it's important for us to think about what it is we want to do and then choose the technology that will meet that need. So, thinking about the features we're going to want to use, and then looking for the platforms that have those features. So I think perhaps after you see some of my examples here, you'll have a sense of some of the features that you might like to try. So today I'm going to offer you 8 options for ways that you could use video conferencing tools, and hopefully these will just be a springboard for your imagination so that you can think about what would work for you. So the first option, kind of straightforward, we could do an interview or a one-to-one interview, a group interview, or a focus group where the researcher and the participants are on camera. So here we're trying to kind of mimic the face-to-face environment where we're sitting down with someone, we can see them, and we're having a natural conversation. We're at that synchronicity kind of place on the time response continuum, because we can see the person. We know that they are kind of attentive to us. So some of the kinds of things that I would think about here would be, what do you want in the shot? When you look at the literature about visual methods and kind of the earlier research using photographs and things like that, and they talk about, well, what's in the frame, what's outside the frame, that we don't know because we can't see it. So what is important to you to have in the frame, and how are you going to explain that to your participants? So for example, do you want to see their setting? Do you want to see that person's home or home office now that we're all mostly at home? Do you want to see that background, or is it okay with you if they put on a video background and suddenly you're seeing the Golden Gate Bridge? If that, those are things that you want to think through, and to what extent is kind of the view and sounds perhaps of their setting, a part of what you want to observe. So, are you going to look at the books on the bookshelf, the pictures on their desk, or not? What are you, what do you want to see? Or are you primarily interested in, say, the facial expressions and nonverbal signals with the participant? Now, what's outside the screen? We don't know. Is there someone else in the room? If I'm talking about a sensitive issue, I don't know whether the abusive spouse is standing in the doorway glaring at her while she's talking. I can't tell that. Is that something that I want to try to make an agreement about before the exchange? These are just a few things that we might want to think about if we're going to focus on the kind of just the people on the camera. Now, another way of doing it is to put your questions on slides. And here, we might still have the cameras online. So I can see the participant, but I've got the questions. Now, this will help me as a researcher to kind of stay on track. If I've got a, say, a semi-structured interview or a focus group, it puts the questions kind of up front, rather than our faces. Might take a little pressure off the person from feeling self-conscious about being on camera, even though the camera may still be kind of on the banner. It kind of puts the questions up front. And I have used this technique because I thought that it helped to kind of help us stay focused on the questions, and that worked fairly well. And so that's a pretty simple, straightforward approach. So the third option is to start to introduce some other kinds of images. So one way of doing the photo elicitation is that I, as the researcher, am creating images that I'm going to use in the interview or the group. So what might be the advantage of using my own images? Well, if I've taken these pictures or I've drawn these diagrams, I know that I have the right to use them, and I can use them in my publications. And I'm going to talk a little bit more later on about kind of the question of structure and consistency with one participant to the next. But that's if I'm using my images, then I have to decide, am I going to use the same images with all of the participants, or might it vary? I just put in a couple of pictures here from the Rocky Mountains. I hope gives you a little view of another place. Option 4, we could use a kind of a photo voice type of technique where we ask the participants to take pictures, from their own lives, their own experiences, perhaps, over a period of time. We might say, well, this week, take one picture each day of your activities, whatever it is that we're studying. Then, we can talk about, put those up on the screen and go through them one by one and ask them what those mean to them. With photo voice methods, which if you're not familiar with, I encourage you to take a look at. It's a very interesting approach that I think lends itself to online research. Often researchers will ask someone to not only take photographs, but also to make some notes. So it kind of combines with a diary method. So, that's something you can consider as well. So option 5, we could do graphic elicitation. And so here, this goes back to the visual communication. So, this example I made here where I could say, well, which of these is more similar to your experience in your organization? How do members relate to leaders? What's the role of communication? There are all sorts of things that we might be able to discuss. And, this way it starts to also kind of organize a little bit, the kinds of responses we're going to get, because we're giving them some specific options to choose from and discuss. Then with this example, it's a little bit, this image is a little bit blurry, blown up, but here kind of moving into a little bit more of the enacted side where we're generating visual responses with the participants. So whereas with this one, I'm just describing, using the graphic as a springboard for conversation to communicate some complicated topics. But, we have the ability with many video conferencing tools to actually start to draw on the screen and represent. So with this one, I did this study about women entrepreneurs, and I wanted to know what their aspirations were. So I started out with this kind of blank continuum, and then in this particular case, they talked and I kind of made visual notes and tried to represent what they were saying. And then I would, ask them questions to clarify what they were talking about. So you can see here with this one, I was on the camera, but the participant was not. So, that's, another question. I felt that, in this situation, it was good for the participant to see me, to build credibility and rapport, but it was not, I wasn't, given the topic, what nonverbal cues or emotions and that sort of thing was not important to me, and I didn't feel that I needed to require that the other person be on camera, if they didn't want to be. So again, these are things to think through in advance and consider what works best for you. So this is another example of the kind of interactive generating data from within the study. And this is a study, one of my first studies that really turned me on to the idea of doing research online. I was developing this model, which I've continued to work on, and just wrote a book about this past year. Actually, 2 different books about collaboration. That's what I started out studying online. And so I gave them the model ahead of the interview, so they knew what I was asking about. I wanted to understand the process of collaboration and kind of the, how those pieces fit together, or if there was something that I was missing that I needed to add to the model. So then I had these icons on the screen on a shared whiteboard where we could move the icons around and put them into sequence. So then they could talk through. So this, rather than it being kind of a fixed diagram to use for elicitation, that it became an interactive diagram where they could use these icons to map out, to say, well, first we did this, and then the second step we did was the discussion, and the third step we did was this, but they could move those icons around, manipulate them on the shared whiteboard, and then, of course, all of that is recorded and becomes a part of the data that we've got to use. So I had all kinds of different maps that came out of that. Then option 7, rather than providing them with the diagram, we could use the whiteboard and create a map, create a drawing. We could do brainstorming. So let's say we're using a role play or a problem solving style vignette style of interview, or one-on-one or group, where I could say, well, here's the situation, what would you do? Then they could write on the screen. We could write, either the participant could write, or they can talk and I can transcribe, and then they can say, oh no, that goes over here. Or we could start with a kind of like here, I was thinking, well, I did a study a few years ago about work environments. And so if home, how you're dealing with your home office during the pandemic was my topic, I could just, put that in the middle, and then they could fill in, okay, well, what are the things that make the home office work? What is it that's not working? What are the relationships? So again, rather than simply asking someone a question, tell me about your home office, what works in, home remote virtual work and what doesn't, we can generate some visual data within the research event. So option 8, I mentioned the navigate place. So here I just put up a Google map. If I could go into, something like Google Earth, with the participant, if I were studying something about community or geography or different parts of, where do you feel comfortable? What, where are you dealing with harassment in your environment, or something about the natural world, any number of things that where we could go into something like this. Or again, it could be that we're looking at, well, how do you use this particular tool? You can you can show me, we can walk through it. So rather than simply telling me, well, when I'm posting to my online class, here's how I relate to my students, you could actually go into your online class and show me how you do it. So I hope those give you some ideas to think through that, we can go beyond simply kind of a Q&A style of research and use the visual environment that we have with these tools to not only create really interesting experiences that engage someone and really, perhaps, um, encourage them to think in new ways about their experiences, but we've also recorded the whole thing. So now, we've got all of that really interesting oral, visual, and perhaps even written data to work with. So just a couple more things, for you to think about. One is how much structure is going to fit with this study. So with any, particularly interview research, we think about structured interviews, semi-structured interviews, or unstructured interviews, but those have kind of different implications online that relate to how much preparation are you going to do in advance. So thinking about some of the things that I've shown you, these are, would fit into a semi-structured kind of approach. I've got a plan, I've got materials that I want to share, I've got a sequence I want to use, and with the studies I've done, I pretty much would use the same for all of the participants. But that's, those are choices to make. So my suggestion is, if you are a new researcher and you haven't done this kind of stuff before, going to an unstructured approach might be a bit more challenging because you're trying to manage the technology and the interaction and be attentive at the same time. That's a little bit more challenging. That, say having at least some degree of structure, allows you to practice more easily and to feel more confident about your ability to manage this kind of research interaction. So, then, when we're thinking about, particularly the visual approaches that I've shared with you, these questions fit as well, because it's a, well, am I going to say, use the photo or graphic elicitation and have limited choice answers where I'd say, is this like your home office? Yes or no? Or, it's kind of almost, multiple choice. What category does this fit into for you? And there may be, place for that you can use a combination of these in the same study. But, to think about, how how much you want to prepare in advance, how much consistency you want, from one participant to the next is a factor to think about in advance. So I have a few tips to suggest, and you have the slides, so you'll be able to look at these. As we're thinking about using video conferencing tools and choosing the platform, you could see that I was suggesting camera. Pretty much any video conferencing tool will allow you to use a camera. But when you're looking at how you're going to set up, I mean, today I'm not on the camera, but if I was, I would want to set it up so that I can be looking directly at the camera. There's a lot of interesting literature out there about, they talk about the virtual gaze, that we are so accustomed, particularly, I mean, there are certainly cultural differences. In some cultures, it's a sign of disrespect to look at someone in the eye, but for many cultures, looking at someone in the eye is a sign of trust. I can trust you. It's like we make eye contact. That's important. So if you are looking down at your notes, or you're looking down to, to be, writing notes, that may be disconcerting to your participants. So, really kind of play with your setup to make sure that you can, appear in a way that will allow you to make, to be viewed as engaged by the participant. Then the other point I wanted to emphasize is a feature that allows you to record to your own computer, not to the cloud or the company's computer. This is a big issue and could be another webinar in terms of security and privacy and all of that, protection of the data. But many of the tools now allow you to choose. Now, for example, Zoom, I can choose, am I going to record to if I record it to my computer, then it is not on the Zoom company's website someplace that they could be hacked or whatever. I can put it have it on my own hard drive where I can protect it. That is a feature that is not available in every video conferencing tool, so that's something I would look at. And then always think about a plan B. So maybe have another way of recording the audio on your phone or something so that you have a backup, because things can go wrong. So that's along with that, to have other ways of contacting your participant if something falls apart. I mean, I literally had an occasion where they cut the cable, the actual physical cable, to my home when I was in the middle of doing an interaction, and so obviously I was no longer online. If something can go wrong, it might. So you'll feel more confident if you have a backup. And then, as you could see from my examples here, and certainly there are many ways of doing things, and use what works for you, but especially using if you're doing a semi-structured or a more structured type of exchange, or you have a more structured part of your time with the participants and then open it up for unstructured. But if you can set those up on slides, or have them in one folder so that they're easily accessible on your desktop that you're sharing, that will make life easier. And any websites or applications, have those ready to go. And of course, to practice, surely you've got a friend or someone who would be willing to run through this with you, fellow researcher, somebody, so that you can get a sense of how it works. I encourage you to record those practice sessions so that you can go back and listen. For example, the one that I showed you, that was my study with the women entrepreneurs. I found when I recorded, I wanted to explain the background of the study. But then when I watched the recording, I realized I explained way too much. It was taking up too much time. So I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't recorded it and listened to it, just to see. And then making sure that your participants know what it is you want to do. And in many cases, you might need to include some aspect of that in your consent agreement or in the other information you provide, as a part of the informed part of informed consent. So again, what are your expectations? Do you want to see the person on camera? What if they turn off the camera? Is that okay or not? Do you want to see the setting they're in, or does that not matter to you? What is it that you want? So besides the typical things of when and where and all of that, drill down as much as you can and let them know what it is that you want. And of course, making sure that they have the tools you're planning to use and are comfortable using them. So, sometimes it might be useful to offer a chance to kind of try something out. Let's just meet in the platform and for 5 minutes and do a technology check before we're meeting for the interview. And of course, through all of these interactions, these provide you with the opportunity to kind of build your credibility and your rapport. So being really clear, concise, answering their questions, being responsive, answering emails quickly, and all of that helps while you're in this kind of a preparation process to use that in a productive way. So you could see from what I've described that you might come out of this type of study with a lot of different kinds of data. And we're not going to go into data analysis because that would be a whole nother webinar. But I did ask Stacy to please show you how you might use NVivo to help you work with this kind of data. It's one way that people do. I've talked with a lot of researchers who do this kind of interactive research, but then they simply transcribe the interview or the group interaction and work with the text document. But to my mind, you kind of lose a lot in terms of your observations and things like nonverbal cues. So Stacy, tell us how we could learn from those as well.
Sure. So I'm just going to do this real quickly and show you where you can watch a whole webinar and where I talked about this. But basically, this is NVivo, the latest version. You can import audio and video. So for example, with this video, I can play it and I can watch what's happening. And if I want to pick something visually out, I can do that. So I can start coding in a certain section and then stop if there's something I want to capture. So you see the dog came in with the tail, so maybe I want to capture that. And so that's the part of the video that I coded, and then I can just drag that into a code. I can also write within the transcript here that's right by the video, dog walked into shot, something like that. So you can do that with the video. You can also listen to audio and maybe you want to capture, maybe silences. You can't hear it, sorry, with GoToWebinar, but I could, if I'm want to capture, maybe there's sometimes where the participant's pausing a lot for some reason, maybe I want to capture that, or a sigh or something. Also, Janet talked about images, so you can bring in an image into NVivo like this and actually ask this, based on the photo voice or your elicitation, however you're working with photos, I can highlight a part I want to maybe mention or the researcher mentioned. So I'll just insert a row there and I can type, they said the nets, the nets were important or something here. And then what's nice, I know exactly where they were talking about it. So there's a ton of stuff in NVivo you can help you organize this. And I'll just show you, this is an on-demand webinar on our website where it says transcription integration, but it's a little bit beyond that with the webinar that talks more about how you can use NVivo. And a lot of people ask for the other webinar you mentioned. So if you go to our website, go to resources and go to on-demand webinars, you'll find Janet's webinar that she mentioned at the beginning, when the research is online, I believe. And that's it. So I'll let, I'm just going to go through a few more PowerPoint slides, but Janet, that was great. A lot of really positive feedback about the presentation. So thank you for doing that. I'm just going to go where you can find, I'll let Ali talk about where you can find Janet's book.
Yes, thanks, Stacy, and thanks, Janet, for a great presentation. As you can see on the slide here, Janet has quite a lot of books with Sage, and she's involved in a lot of different writing projects across different styles of books and online learning environments and research platforms. So all of those can be accessed through the Sage website, and I've sent the link to some of her books, particularly the ones that were informing her talk today, into the audience chat. But you're also welcome to reach out to me. I believe my email address is on the top of the presentation, and ask me any questions.
Great, thank you, Ali. And just to talk about the different products NVivo has, we do have to help you collect data, integration with Office, NVivo transcription, which can be very helpful, NVivo desktop, collaboration products to help you if you're working as a team, and then different ways to learn how to use NVivo too. These are all live links, so you can get to that information. So we have one more webinar in December with this series, so hopefully you can join that on an introduction to rapid qualitative research. It's going to be very good on December 4th. I did want to mention the podcast. So one of my first podcasts I did with a researcher was on Photo Voice. So check those out. They're on all the major platforms. You just search NVivo and it'll come up. And it's just great to hear really the passion of the researchers come out in the podcasts. And lastly, it'd be great if you'd like to join the community. There'll be a very short survey at the end asking a few questions. And if you'd like to join, you can let me know there or just go to this link. So I'll let Ali take it over with any questions people have, or we have a few we can take just because of time constraints.
Yes, I'll do my best to combine some into themes as well. So Janet, I think one of the big themes that's coming out from questions surrounds ethics. So thinking about collecting data online during COVID, are there any particular challenges of the pandemic itself rather than online? But equally, lots of the different methods you brought up might impact IRB approval, and some people saying that IRB approval for certain types of methods like unstructured interviews seems to be more difficult or at least less popular. So do you have any general advice about ethical approval and managing the special issues and ethical challenges with COVID?
Well, I don't know what what in particular, with the COVID situation. I think it maybe just requires a little bit more attention to the situation that someone might be in. It might be more difficult to have, say, a quiet time to participate when they've got, kids and, everybody's home trying to work and do everything else. So, it might be worthwhile to say, think about having a couple of shorter interactions rather than, an hour or more type of a interview. But in terms of the ethical side of it, I'm not sure. But in my doing qualitative research online, it goes into great detail about ethical issues and options through all of the stages, the kind of initial approval, recruitment, participation. So there are 2 chapters in that book that go into a lot of detail around that. I would just say that in terms of doing this kind of research, I think that I take the informed part of the informed consent very seriously. And while you may be in a situation where you have to use a particular, say, like an agreement format that's provided by your institution, to kind of think beyond that about especially if you're using images, what kinds of images are you wanting to be able to use in your presentations or publications versus images that you are simply analyzing, as a part of your research and will not be actually shown. So thinking through some of those kinds of things in advance will be helpful. And again, I mean, in terms of, say, the structured versus unstructured, I think, having some unstructured time, I encourage you to think in terms of a mix of structure, so that you might have some more structured questions that, perhaps are, some kind of background information that helps you to understand a little bit more about the participants' situation or where they're coming from. And at the end to have, some unstructured, well, is there anything else you want to tell me? Well, what else would you add, maybe if you're doing that kind of interactive drawing thing? Well, is there something that is, I showed the picture of the home office. Well, is there something about your neighborhood, that's going to make a difference? You could just, have kind of more open-ended questions. But I agree that, especially if you're in a situation where the people making your approval are not very familiar with online research, then trying to, frame it and explain it in a way that is understandable, I think, is going to be helpful. And again, this is really, I came from working with doctoral students for many years. So when I was doing qualitative research online, and currently I'm finishing up the second edition, my students, my former students who are now Dr. Somebody, are on my mind, and, thinking about, the struggles that they went through, and, the need to convince perhaps more traditional professors and IRBs and ethics review boards, et cetera, or funders, that what they're doing is legitimate. So I really try to provide a lot of ammunition for people to use when creating their proposals. So I think you might find some helpful materials there. I think, being able to think through what it is that you're doing and why, and to explain it in a very clear way, and then, talk about how you are protecting the data, and the participant will help you to have some success.
Thank you, Janet. Do we have time? I'm conscious of the fact that we're 3 minutes over, but do we have time for one more question? I think it's an important one.
Well, I have time if you do.
Yep, that's fine. Go ahead.
Stacey, good? Okay. So we also have a question about a large part of participants who don't have access to resources or tech or technology knowledge even are almost excluded in online research. So what's your take on that? And do you have any tips on making online research more inclusive and an equitable environment?
Okay, well, there are a couple of things that I would suggest. And of course, with the pandemic, it's even more difficult. The first is, where I talked about the kind of 3 levels of the technology as a medium. If you're thinking about technology as a medium, then, what is it that they have? It may be that all they have is a telephone, and that's what you could do. Or it may be that, it may be that online research is just simply not feasible, in the situation. Or it may be that, whatever communications abilities they have, you can use. Maybe you have to send some of the, let's say, for example, you want to do some elicitation kinds of things, and some, the photos or graphics or whatever. Maybe you have to send some things through the mail, and then you get on the telephone and talk about it, and you don't have it in front of you, at the same time. Use what you have to the best, that you can. You want the person to feel comfortable. Now, in the pre-pandemic, and let's hope post-pandemic world, another suggestion is to work through community organizations. Now, for example, one of the researchers I interviewed, actually a couple of researchers I interviewed from Canada, where they had an established telehealth system. So, people were living in remote areas, they already have a setup where, people are accustomed to going to, say, a clinic and sitting down in front of the computer where they're going to interact with the specialist who is located somewhere else, or community centers, libraries, other kinds of spaces that a senior center, if you're working with senior citizens, where they might have technology, and the obviously this involves a little bit more than just a gatekeeper. You need to have some partners in your project, but it can be done where they've set up the computer in someone's office. A participant just comes in and sits down, and you can interact with them, and they don't need to have a lot of digital skills to do it. So right now that's not a technique that can be necessarily used because we can't gather in physical places, but that is something that a lot of researchers have found to be successful. So once we can be in physical places together again, that's another approach you could try.
Okay, I think that's probably bringing us to a good stopping point, but I have sent out Janet's website link, and also, as I said, my email is currently on the screen. So if anyone has any additional questions, they can reach out to Janet directly. I know there's quite a bit that we didn't get through, or you're welcome to reach out to me and I can kind of collate any questions and send them to Janet.
Yes, if you send me the questions, I will be, in addition to being able to find this recording on the NVivo site, I will be posting on methodspace.com, where I'm a lead writer and organizer. And if you send me the questions, I will try to either gather resources or respond to them in some posts on Sage MethodSpace. So that's methodspace.com. So thank
Great.
you all, and I really hope that you will find some approaches that will work for you and allow you to have some dynamic and interesting exchanges to collect and generate data that can really give a broad picture of your participants' experiences, and then as Stacy was showing you, to really use that data in a full way. I'm not criticizing someone who just decides to transcribe it and work with the document, but I think we have the option to really include a fuller picture.
Well, thank you so much, Janet. People are very appreciative of the presentation. They've learned a lot, they're saying. So thank you for your time, and thank you, Ali, for helping organize this. And I hope everyone has a great day. Yeah, sorry. So have a great day, everyone, and contact us if you have more questions. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you.
Bye.